I'm going to be here because I have to be here for AP.
Oh, okay. Okay, I just didn't know if you were taking off the elementaries or... Oh, you want the wireless?
What? Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin in 1 moment. We will begin in about 1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin. Please stop talking. Turn your attention to the front. Thank you so much, folks. Every year, Northeastern High School takes this opportunity, typically the Monday following Veterans Day on November 12th, to recognize the sacrifice and the service of the United States veterans. It's a solemn opportunity for us to really express our gratitude, our thanks for all they've done, all their sacrifices. This morning's no different. Mr. Schwartz annually puts together a phenomenal assembly, an opportunity for us to reflect on those sacrifices and on those commitments that thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands before have made. We're going to begin today with the presentation of the colors from the VFW Color Guard. We'll have our national anthem performed by Odyssey and the Pledge of Allegiance, which I'll begin. After the Pledge of Allegiance, you'll remain standing for the final presentation of the colors until they're off stage. Please rise as we begin, and the national anthem is performed by Odyssey.
All right. Head, hut, forward, or. Forward, or.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for the completion of the presentation of the colors.
First the color. Forward. Right, stay. Forward, forward.
You may be seated. We are going to take a moment. Shh. We'll take a moment to show our appreciation first to Odyssey for their performance of the national anthem. Thank you. Also, thank you to the Mount Wolf VFW Color Guard. Thank you for joining us this morning, and we all thank you for your service. Thank you. And before we formally begin, if we could just take a second, make sure cell phones are off. If you have earbuds or headphones, just make sure they're not visible so our guests know that we're attentive to today's important message. As I had mentioned before, it's an important assembly for our community here. Every year I have students say it's their favorite assembly of the year. And because I think the reason is that we're all touched in some way by the sacrifices of our veterans. I know in my own family, my father and my grandfather served, and I know many of you are like that, and we have our own staff who served. So I know it touches us each personally, and we want to take this moment to express our gratitude. I'm going to introduce Mr. Schwartz to introduce all of our guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gay. Here we gather once again, November 12th, the day following Veterans Day, and our country still has men and women in harm's way somewhere in the world. 100 years ago yesterday, November 11th, 1918, the guns fell silent over the battlefields of Europe with the signing of the armistice, ending what was referred to then as the war to end all wars. Today, we know that event as World War I, but that was not until the world collapsed into another global conflict today known as World War II. Originally named Armistice Day, November 11th, called Veterans Day since 1954, it is a day to honor and recognize the brave men and women who have served and continue to serve in our armed forces. American men and women serve with distinction and have throughout history, dating to the Revolutionary War of 1775, and additional military conflicts including the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and most recently, Iraq and Afghanistan. Our military has also been in many countries around the world helping in the struggle for freedom and democracy, such as Grenada, Panama, Haiti, and Bosnia. These places may not be as familiar to us as such locations as Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, Incheon, the Mekong Delta, Kabul, or Baghdad, but they are no less important, for they symbolize service and self-sacrifice on the part of our military veterans. As I reflect upon this assembly program, I cannot find better words than those spoken by Captain John Miller, a character in the movie Saving Private Ryan. Just moments before his death, Captain Miller speaks two very important words to Private James Ryan: earn this. I believe this film to be a window into a time in which uncommon valor was commonly practiced. But what have we done as a nation to earn what our veterans, not just of World War II, have done, but all veterans who have donned the uniform of service and sacrifice? Have we individually done something to make someone's life a little easier or better in some way? I would like to ask each of you sitting here today this question. What do you believe about our country? Do you believe it is worth protecting our way of life and the blessings that freedom has provided you each day? Do you believe it is worth defending the very freedoms that give an individual the opportunity to worship freely or to speak freely his or her mind, even if it is contrary to popular opinion? Do you believe that Americans are the only people who should have the opportunity to enjoy the very blessings of a government that grants freedom without fear of oppression and reprisals? It does not matter today what your political opinion, affiliation, or your personal stance on important social issues. Today is the day to honor the men and women of our country who have served this country with pride and distinction as members of the United States Armed Forces. It is through the unselfish sacrifice and military service of our military veterans who served in times of war and also of times of peace that we are able to gather freely here today. America has long been the model of democracy in the world. When freedom and liberty have been threatened, the American soldier, whether on land, on the sea, or in the air, has responded. President Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "A people that values its privileges above its principles soon loses both." In the movie The Lost Battalion, Major Charles Whittlesey said, "Life would be a lot simpler if we could choose our duties and our obligations. We can't and we shouldn't." A World War I song says, "Blood shed for all, sacrifice and tears, love for our flag and country dear." That belief is embodied in our guests with us today. These brave men and women stepped forward to serve when the nation called. They left the safety of home and the familiar of the uncertainty and danger inherent in a war zone. Many of us here today know veterans, some whose service to country ended years ago, some who are currently in harm's way, and we honor and remember them as well today. Veterans Day is not about sales at local department stores, nor is it a marketing pitch. Every day we should take pride and the time to honor our veterans and their sacrifice, which have made our country what it is today. I challenge each of you that when you see a veteran, say thank you. It's only a small token of appreciation, but it can mean so much. So it is with great pride and admiration and a sincere thank you that I introduce our honored guests to you today. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please stand to be recognized as I call your names? Pat Rambo, U.S. Army. Roger Miller, U.S. Marine Corps. Butch Harbold, U.S. Marine Corps. Bob Casebeer, U.S. Army. Todd Richwine, U.S. Army. Rich Schaefer, U.S. Army. And John Brenner, U.S. Army. Several members of our faculty, staff, and school board are veterans of military service. Mr. John Eister, United States Air Force. Mrs. Susan Schleig, United States Army Reserve. Mr. St. Clair Simmons, United States Army Reserve. Mrs. Wendy Seifert, U.S. Army. And Mr. Kevin Gephardt, U.S. Army. Thank you. hope I didn't miss anybody. I'd heard there was a possibility of a few people attending who are currently serving, but I don't know if they're here or not. But again, thank you for your service. Our keynote speaker this morning is Captain Steve Lee. Captain Lee is a 28-year veteran of the U.S. Army with 3 overseas tours. His awards include 6 Army Commendation Medals, 2 Meritorious Service Medals, and the Army Bronze Star. He is currently stationed at Fort Indiantown Gap, where he is the operations officer for the 378th Combat Sustainment Support Battalion. His wife of 18 years, Braden, and 2 children, Bennett and Sophie, most recently moved from Iowa and have lived in the York area for the past year and a half. Welcome to Northeastern High School, Captain Lee.
Is this on? All right. Of those, I can't stand behind a podium, sorry, so I have to wander around because I got ADD and all that, right? So among those things that Mr. Swartz said about me, the thing I'm most proud of is my son Bennett, my daughter Sophie. They represent my loved home and my posterity, my loved home. And that is something that I want to talk about a little bit later, so put that away. So when I was in basic training, my drill sergeant came up to me and said, "Private, you need a checkup from the neck up." And so I said to myself, he's talking about my brain, and I think he just called me stupid. Later on he said, "Private, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself." And I said to him, "Drill Sergeant, thank you for that sound advice." Actually, I didn't. I said, "Yes, Drill Sergeant." And then I wanted to figure out what I needed to check before I wrecked, right? So check yourself before you wreck yourself. Why am I talking about that? I'll get to that later. I was wondering also if there's any split-op soldiers here. Any seniors that went to basic training last summer and are going to continue on? Is there anybody in that category? Because you're like the youngest veteran too. So nobody from this school is a split-op. All right. I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way. But I wanted to continue with a public service announcement. All right? So what year did the United States begin? What year? 1776, right? So what year did the U.S. military begin? 1775, right? First with the Army, then with the Navy, then with the Marine Corps. We just celebrated that over the weekend. So here's the public service announcement. This land of the free and home of the brave is brought to you by the U.S. military. So back then, between the years of 1775 and 1783, we fought a revolutionary war. And it was a true revolution. It was a complete change in the way business was done in countries. Because in Britain, power, this was their thought, was given by God to kings and queens and lords. And then that power was given sparingly and often dictated to the people. The revolution, again, it was a true revolution, revolved that upside down. And it turned it into God giving people the power and us lending it sparingly to the government. It was a complete revolution, a complete turnaround. And we fought against huge odds. Remember, this was the biggest military on the earth at the time. And by all rights, we should not have won the Revolutionary War. We should not have won that new idea that we have the power. But we did win. And we enjoyed those values that we fought for, that were enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, that we are endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. That among those rights are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and in some of the older documents, life, liberty, and property. individual property. Power to the individuals, lent to the government. Revolution. And for about 30 years, we enjoyed that. We enjoyed the experiment with something a little different, something revolutionarily different. And in 1812, those adversaries were back. It was the same largest military in the world, and quite honestly, they were kind of kicking our butts. We lost most of the battles of the War of 1812 is what I'm referring to, over a few years. We lost most of those battles. And I want to paint a picture for you how dark it must have seemed when we had a nation that was conceived in liberty, threatened. I want to paint the picture that it was not certain that we would come through this. The dark time of the War of 1812 got so bad that our adversary invaded Washington, D.C., and came in, set fire to the Capitol building. They sat down and ate the meal that our First Lady had prepared, and then they proceeded to set fire to the White House. Can you imagine that happening today? That happened. And not long after, Britain was moving in on the ports of Baltimore to choke off our trade and to squelch out that American ideal once and for all. But the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Sometimes we sing that song so fast, and we don't realize what it says and what it means. We prevailed in the War of 1812, and thank God that we did. So what was the difference between what we were fighting for in the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812? Well, by then we had something called a Constitution. In 1787, we have this thing called a Constitution. And the Constitution is a beautiful thing because it codifies how we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, not a perfect union, but a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for a common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, in my case it's Bennett and Sophie, did ordain and establish that document. That is a precious document. Now that document, remember when I said check yourself before you wreck yourself? It is that document that allows this country to check itself before it wrecks itself. It has checks and balances in that document. Are we right now a perfect union? No. That's not what the Constitution, the preamble said. It says a more perfect union. That this document can get us through tough times and make us more perfect as time goes on. It allows that. A more perfect union. So in the War of 1812, as Fort McHenry was defending the oncoming Brits, the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. There's a fourth verse of the Star-Spangled Banner, and it says this: "Oh, thus be it ever, when freemen shall stand between their loved homes and the war's desolation." And that's what veterans do. That's what veterans have done. That's what soldiers have done through the Constitution. every veteran here today, and every soldier, every Marine, everyone in the Navy, they take an oath to the Constitution. They raise their hand, and they say, I solemnly swear or affirm to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to bear true faith and allegiance to the same. To the Constitution. And notice, they don't take an oath to defend the people of the United States, or even the United States itself, or even the government of the United States. They swear an oath. And I want to tell you that on this Veterans Day, they swear an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States, the thing that incubates us through those tough times. The Constitution of the United States, against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to bear true faith and allegiance to the same. Oh, thus be it ever, when freemen shall stand between their loved homes and the war's desolation. That's what veterans do. And I'm proud to be numbered among them, because it's beautiful. It's truly a beautiful thing. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than might. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine. Veterans and future servicemen, I salute you. I thank you for standing between my loved home and the war's desolation. I thank you for standing up for freedom, for our way of life, and to continue that on. I salute you, and I'm honored to be numbered among you. Thank you. Mr. Schwartz?
Thank you, Captain Lee. I would ask now that you focus your attention on the screen as we honor the veterans in our lives who did exactly what Captain Lee spoke about, putting themselves between us and the war, the battle, the veterans in our lives. seems like every day should be Veterans Day to many of us, for many of us have been touched by the veterans in our lives. We cannot gather to honor our living veterans without taking a moment of silence to remember those who served with distinction, those who are no longer with us. So let us pause, stand, and pause for a moment of silence as we remember those who have served and those, in the immortal words of Abraham Lincoln, the utmost sacrifice. Let us pause. You may be seated. You may be seated. I would like to personally thank Mr. Weichert for his time in creating our video tribute. He always does a tremendous job, and that by far is my most favorite part of the school year, to be honest. Thank you to Odyssey for adding their musical talent. And might I say, that's the way the national anthem should be performed. Outstanding job. Thank you. To the members of the VFW Color Guard, thank you for presenting the colors, and thank you for attending our assembly today. And thank you to Nate Tully and John Hunger for your rendition of Taps. Thank you for your attention, and please remember to say thank you to the veterans when you see them out in the public. It's a small thing, but it can mean so much. Thank you. Mr. Gay?
Ladies and gentlemen, one more round of applause for all those who have served. We thank you. We thank you, gentlemen. We thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And an enormous thank you to Mr. Swartz, who coordinates this every year. Thank you, Mr. Swartz. Teachers are heading back to homerooms. We're going to dismiss by section. We're going to start with the center section. Center section can head on back. If you're not in the center section, please hang out. Staff, please feel free to head out.